Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time. Welcome back to Mr. Michael's channel for extraordinary young people. It's wonderful to be in your company again, and I'm very grateful for your time. Now, this video is called Writing a Legendary Letter, and we're going to focus on the CIE O-Level English Language Paper 1, and particularly the directed writing section of that Paper 1. Now, you know the drill by now. If you are not familiar with the structure of Paper 1 or Paper 2 for that matter, my recommendation to you is to go back to Mr. Michael's channel and look for the video called A Guide to Paper 1 or A Guide to Paper 2, because once you know what you have to do in the exam, this video is going to make a whole lot more sense to you. So go and do that now if you haven't done it already. And if you have, let's have a look at what we're going to do today. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to think about the different types of letter that you may have to write in the English O-Level exam. And then when we finish that, we're going to look at an exam style letter question. And then the final thing that we're going to do in this video is we're going to think about the structure of a legendary letter. So I don't think there's anyone on earth who doesn't know what a letter is, even though in the last 10, 15 years or so, letters have been largely replaced by other forms of communication, such as emails or instant messaging applications. However, there are still some circumstances in which you will be required to write a letter, and one of those situations is the O-Level English exam, where letter writing is one of the possible task types in the directed writing section of O-Level English Paper 1. Now, letters can be both formal or informal. When I was a young man many hundreds of years ago, I used to write a letter to my grandmother every summer, explaining to her what I was doing with my summer holiday, where I was going, what kind of things I was getting up to. And she would write me back a letter saying, you should come and visit me, and giving me advice and telling me to behave myself. So that's an informal letter. If you go on holiday, you might write a letter to your friend telling her or him all of the activities that you are doing. So it's not about a particularly serious matter. It's usually between friends or between family members. Now, when we think about formal letters, which is the topic of this video, there are a number of different types of them. Now, the first type is called a letter of complaint. So imagine if you went on that holiday and you arrived at your destination and you went to pick up your luggage and it wasn't there and it didn't turn up for 4 days. What would you do? Well, most likely you would write a letter of complaint. You would say, I am extremely disappointed by the poor standard of service provided by your airline. That's a letter of complaint. Now, if you were working for the airline and you received that letter of complaint, what would you have to do? Well, you'd have to write a letter of apology. You would have to say sorry for the inconvenience caused to the customer. Dear sir, we are extremely apologetic for the difficulties that you have faced, and we expect to compensate you shortly. That's a letter of apology, saying that you've done something wrong, saying sorry. Another type is a letter providing important information. How many times have you been given a letter by your school explaining the dates of the next holiday, or telling your parents that you're going to go on a school trip, or you have an extra class, or something like that? These are letters providing important information. And the final one is called a letter expressing an opinion. A few years back in the O-Level exam, there was a question which asked for your opinion on a new road which was being built through your area. So when there's a controversial issue, an issue that many people disagree about, they might write a letter to a newspaper expressing their opinion, trying to persuade other people to agree with them. That's called a letter expressing an opinion. So let's have a look at the exam style question. I'm going to read it to you now. It says, one teacher in particular has helped you a great deal this year. You decide to write a letter to the local newspaper to make readers aware of the effort your teacher puts in. Write your letter. It must include the following: details about the teacher and where the teacher works, a description of how the teacher has helped you and how you've benefited from it, and suggestions about how the teacher should be rewarded. Cover all 3 points above in detail. You should make your letter polite and informative. Start your letter, Dear Editor, and remember to add an appropriate ending. Now, there are 3 points that you are instructed to cover in detail. We're going to call them from here on in the bullet points. And it's extremely important, very important, that you cover all 3 of those bullet points if you want to get a good score on your directed writing task. I will repeat. make sure that you cover all of the bullet points when you are writing your letter and when you're writing any directed writing task. The best way to do that is, before you begin, plan and make sure that you cover each of the bullet points in your plan. Then you write your letter, and then at the end you give yourself a little bit of time to go back and to check and to make sure that all of the bullet points are covered. If you don't cover one of them, or even two of them, what a nightmare, then your score will certainly be greatly reduced. It will go down. So do be careful. Now, before we get started with the actual letter, we have to think about the greeting and the ending of letters. Now, as it says on the screen there, Dear Mr. Michael, if you know the name of the person that you are writing to, like Mr. Michael or Mr. Johnson or Miss Elizabeth or whoever it may be, then you end your letter with yours sincerely. However, if you do not know the name of the person that you are writing to and you write Dear Editor, or you write Dear Sir or Madam, or you write To whom it may concern, if you don't know the name of the person that you're writing to, you end the letter yours faithfully. Keep that in mind. It's important. Now, when we start the letter, like with all pieces of writing, we begin with an introductory paragraph. So what does an introductory paragraph do in this letter? Well, it explains the topic of the letter and provides a brief introduction to Mr. Harold. Who is Mr. Harold, you might ask? Well, you're about to find out. The question instructs us to begin, Dear Editor, and the letter continues, I am writing this letter in order to inform you of a wonderful teacher who has been a tremendous help to me this year. The teacher's name is Mr. Harold, and he works at my school, Randall College in Malaysia. He is a teacher of English who has been working at the school for a long time. His popularity with the students is down to the fact that his lessons are always entertaining and captivating, and he clearly cares deeply about his students. Now, I've highlighted two things in the first paragraph there. The first one is in red, and we're going to call that the topic sentence because it explains very clearly what the topic of this letter is going to be. It says, I'm writing this letter in order to inform you of a wonderful teacher who has been a tremendous help to me this year. From the very beginning of the letter, we know exactly what the writer is writing about. They're writing about this wonderful teacher whose name happens to be Mr. Harold. So the first sentence of the first paragraph must leave the reader very clear as regards what the topic of your letter is. That's important advice. Now, I've also highlighted the word captivating in blue. Do you know what that means? Now, if you don't know what it means, that's why I highlighted it in blue, because it's quite challenging vocabulary. I would like you to go to a dictionary, or I'd like you to go to Google, and I'd like you to write down the definition of the word captivating in your vocabulary journal. What do you mean you don't have a vocabulary journal? Well, you should. A vocabulary journal is very important for you to write down your new words, words that you've just come across. So if you don't know what it means, go away, look it up, write it down in the vocabulary journal, and then continue with the lesson. Go on. I'm sure you did it, right? Now, I've also included on that slide the first bullet point, which says details about the teacher and where the teacher works. Now, have I answered that bullet point in this paragraph? Yes, I've said some details about Mr. Harold, and I've said where the teacher works. So I've completed that bullet point. I can move on to the next one. So let's move on to main body paragraph 1. Now, in this paragraph, we're going to describe how the teacher has helped us and how we have benefited from him. Now, let's have a look at the paragraph. It says, Mr. Harold has personally helped me in many ways. First, he encouraged me to be more diligent in my approach to studying. He told me that I had the potential to be successful, which gave me a great deal of self-belief. Mr. Harold also organised additional classes for us, both after school and during school holidays. He could have spent this time with his family or relaxing, but he is dedicated to helping us. After all of this support, I managed to get an A in my English O-level. Hooray! A result that I would never have expected at the beginning of this year. Now, I've highlighted a number of things in this paragraph. The first thing that I've highlighted is the first sentence in red, which says, Mr. Harold has personally helped me in many ways. Again, this is called a topic sentence. It provides us with the topic of the whole paragraph. What is this paragraph about? Well, we know from the first sentence that it's about how Mr. Harold has helped the writer. And then I've also highlighted the word diligent in blue. You know what you have to do with that. If you don't know the meaning, you have to go and look it up in a dictionary or online, and then you're going to write it in your vocabulary journal. Don't forget to do that, please. Very, very important. The last thing that I've highlighted is at the bottom of the paragraph in orange. It says, after all of this support, I managed to get an A in my English O-level, a result that I would never have expected at the beginning of this year. Now, in order to understand why I have highlighted that, we have to look at the bullet point, which I have included on the slide. The bullet point says, a description of how the teacher has helped you and how you have benefited from it. So, how have we addressed this bullet point? Have we written down how the teacher helped us? Yes, we said he gave us a great deal of self-confidence and he organized additional classes, etc. And have we explained how we benefited from it? Yes, we wrote down, and that's why I highlighted it in orange, that I managed to get an A in my English O-level, a result that I would never have expected at the beginning of this year. That's the way that I benefited from Mr. Harold's help. So, as you can see, again, this paragraph has addressed the second bullet point. Let's move on to main body paragraph 2. It says suggestions about how Mr. Harold should be rewarded. So, what does the paragraph say? As a shy and modest man, I do not believe Mr. Harold would want to be rewarded for his hard work. However, as his students, we want him to know that we appreciate his hard work. He would not appreciate a reward or a gift, as he always tells us that he's just doing his job. But we know that he is going beyond the call of duty. Hence, publishing this letter alongside the photo we have enclosed would act as reward enough for him. If you did so, it would make us all very pleased. Again, I've highlighted the first sentence, which is the topic sentence of this paragraph. We've said that I don't think Mr. Harold would want to be rewarded for his hard work. So we know that this paragraph is all about how Mr. Harold should be rewarded. And we can see the bullet point there, suggestions about how the teacher should be rewarded. Have we made a suggestion? Yes, we said by printing this letter and by printing his photograph in the newspaper, that would be a sufficient reward for him. So we've covered the bullet points and we're ready to move on. As with every excellent piece of writing, we should end with a concluding paragraph which brings the letter to a close. We are very grateful for your time spent reading our letter. We know that we were very fortunate to have a teacher like Mr. Harold, and so sharing his hard work and dedication with the world would mean a great deal to us. We look forward to reading this letter in the newspaper. Yours faithfully, Ebenezer Scrooge. Now, remember we spoke before about the ending of the letter. It says, yours faithfully, Ebenezer Scrooge. Yours faithfully. Why? Because we don't know the name of the person that we're writing to. We've just addressed them as Dear Editor. It's really important to remember that. And we've also started this concluding paragraph with a final topic sentence. We are very grateful for your time spent reading our letter. This indicates that we are concluding the letter and that we are writing a conclusion. So let's have a look as a summary. It's very important to have an appropriate greeting and ending when writing a letter. If you know the name of the person, you're going to write, Dear Mr. Michael, and end the letter, yours sincerely. If you don't know the name of the person, you're going to write Dear Editor or Dear Madam, and you're going to end yours faithfully. Don't forget that. Then, after that, you have to cover all of the bullet points. As you saw in this letter, I made sure that every bullet point was covered in detail in order to get the highest possible number of points. After that, we also need to think carefully about the tone of your writing. Remember that the question said you should be polite, and that means that you should be formal in your language at all times. And the last thing, you must write at least 250 words. If you go below that, then it's possible that you may be marked down. You may lose some points. Now, I hope the video was useful. I hope it was beneficial. If you have any comments or any questions, please ask them in the comments below this video, and I look forward to working with you again in the future. All the very best. You take care.